The first red flag was not a transaction. It was the applause. Daniel stood at the back of the hotel ballroom while 300 people clapped for his wife. Crystal chandeliers glowed above round tables dressed in white linen. Waiters moved like ghosts between chairs, refilling water glasses no one was drinking. On stage, Lila smiled with that soft, practiced warmth that made strangers trust her in under 10 seconds. She wore a navy dress, simple, elegant. A silver ribbon pin rested over her heart. Behind her, a screen showed photos of sick children, volunteers, hospital rooms painted with cartoon animals. Hope Forward Foundation, annual benefit gala. People called her an angel. Daniel watched her pause, hand over chest, eyes shining just enough. She spoke about compassion, about transparency, about every dollar making a difference. The crowd leaned in like churchgoers. Daniel felt proud. Then, strangely small, he had helped stuff envelopes at their kitchen table. He had loaded boxes of donated blankets into the SUV. He had listened to her practice speeches in their bedroom while he folded laundry. Still, in rooms like this, he felt like a background prop. After the speech, donors lined up to shake her hand. A woman in a diamond bracelet hugged Lila and said the foundation had restored her faith in humanity. Daniel held 2 glasses of sparkling water and waited for a gap so he could pass one to his wife. He caught her eye. She gave him a quick smile. Grateful, distracted, already turning back to the next person. On the ride home, she kicked off her heels in the passenger seat and laughed, giddy with adrenaline. "Can you believe we cleared almost 400,000 tonight?" Daniel whistled low. "That is huge." She squeezed his knee. "We are really doing something that matters." At a red light, he glanced at her bare feet on the dashboard and felt a rush of love so strong it hurt. He had married a good woman. At least that was what he told himself. 2 weeks later, he found the first number that did not fit. It was a Tuesday morning, 6:43 a.m. The house still held that heavy quiet before the day started. Their daughter, Emma, slept upstairs with a stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. Daniel sat at the kitchen island with a mug of coffee going cold. Lila was already out for a breakfast meeting with a corporate sponsor. Her laptop sat open on the counter. She'd asked him to print shipping labels for a batch of care packages. He moved the mouse to wake the screen. Her email was open. He hesitated, then told himself he was not snooping. He was helping. He searched for the latest supplier invoice. A spreadsheet attachment caught his eye. Operating disbursements Q3. He clicked. Rows of numbers filled the screen. Office supplies, event rentals, marketing. Then one line. Consulting services, $72,000. He frowned. They did not have consultants. Lila ran most of the strategy herself. A retired accountant volunteered part-time. He scrolled another line. Administrative support retainer, $58,000. His chest tightened. He opened the Details tab. Vendor name, BrightPath Solutions. He did not recognize it. He Googled the name. No website, no reviews, no business listing. He sat back slowly. Maybe a new firm, maybe temporary help he had not heard about. Still, a pulse started behind his eyes. That night, he asked casually while washing dishes. "Who is BrightPath Lila?" Drying plates, did not look up. "Oh, just a consulting group helping us streamline donor data, boring back-end stuff." 72,000 boring. She laughed lightly. "Nonprofit compliance is expensive. You want us to get audited." He smiled back, but his stomach felt hollow. Over the next week, he started noticing small things. Packages arriving with no return address. Lila taking calls outside on the porch, voice low. A second phone he had never seen before, tucked deep in her tote bag. He told himself not to spiral. Then came the hospital visit. They were touring a pediatric wing where Hope Forward had funded new equipment. Cameras followed. A local news crew watched Lila comfort a mother whose son was recovering from surgery. Daniel stood near the back with other volunteers. A nurse approached him quietly. "Your wife is incredible," she said. "We are so grateful." He nodded. The nurse added, "We were worried last year when the grant amount was reduced, but she fought to keep the partnership." "Reduced?" Daniel forced a smile. "I did not know it was reduced." The nurse blinked. "Yes, from 200,000 to 120. Still wonderful, of course." The hallway seemed to tilt. Daniel remembered the gala numbers, the corporate sponsors, the emergency fundraiser after the spring campaign. The foundation had never mentioned cuts. That night, while Lila slept, he sat in the dark living room with his laptop open. He pulled up public tax filings for the foundation. He compared reported program spending to internal newsletters, to social media posts bragging about impact. The gap widened the longer he looked. He felt sick, then angry, then ashamed for feeling angry. Maybe he misunderstood nonprofit accounting. Maybe. At 2:15 a.m., he opened the spreadsheet again. Bright Path Solutions. He searched the vendor ID number embedded in the file. It matched the routing number of a personal checking account. The account holder name appeared in small text. Lila Morgan. His ears rang. He stared at the screen until the letters blurred. In the bedroom, Lila shifted in her sleep and murmured something soft. Daniel closed the laptop and sat very still. The next morning, he made pancakes for Emma with hands that did not feel like his own. Lila kissed his cheek on the way out. "You are quiet today," she said, "just tired." She smiled. "Big planning meeting tonight." "Might be late." He watched her leave and felt like he was watching a stranger walk down his driveway. He did not confront her. Not yet. Instead, he followed the money. He copied files onto a flash drive. He photographed bank statements when she left them on the counter. He learned words he had never cared about before. Restricted funds. Donor intent. Administrative caps. He discovered Bright Path Solutions had received over $200,000 in 18 months. He found a second shell vendor, Horizon Outreach Logistics, registered to a mailbox service 3 towns over. He drove there one afternoon. A strip mall, nail salon, tax prep office, a UPS store. Inside, rows of metal mailboxes. He rented a box under a fake name just to access the directory list. Horizon Outreach. Box 314. He stood in the fluorescent light feeling like he might throw up. At home, he watched Lila help Emma with a school project about community helpers. "Our family helps sick kids," Emma said proudly. Daniel turned away so she would not see his face. The breaking point came at a donor dinner in a private home. 10 guests, candlelight, soft music. Lila told a story about a child who had to wait months for life-saving equipment before Hope Forward stepped in. Daniel knew that equipment had been delayed because a promised payment never arrived, because money had been rerouted. A man at the table wiped his eyes and pledged another $50,000. Daniel excused himself to the bathroom. He locked the door and leaned over the sink, breathing hard. In the mirror, he saw a man who had been clapping at galas while children waited. He hated that man. When he returned, Lila squeezed his hand under the table. "You okay?" He nodded, unable to speak. That night, he did not sleep. By dawn, he had made a decision that felt like jumping off a roof. He called an attorney who specialized in nonprofit fraud. He sent the files. The attorney listened quietly, then said, "If this is accurate, it is serious. You need to prepare for fallout." Daniel laughed weakly. "From my wife, especially from your wife." For weeks, he lived 2 lives. At home, he packed lunches, folded laundry, listened to Lila rehearse speeches. In secret, he worked with investigators. They subpoenaed bank records. They traced transfers. The numbers grew. Donations meant for hospital wings had paid for a condo titled under a holding company. luxury travel disguised as conference expenses, designer clothes labeled as outreach wardrobe. Each discovery scraped something raw inside him. He still loved her. That was the worst part. He remembered late nights when she cried from exhaustion, swearing she just wanted to help people. Maybe she had started that way. The confrontation did not happen in a dramatic public scene. It happened in their kitchen on a Thursday evening while spaghetti boiled on the stove. Emma was at a friend's house. Daniel laid a folder on the counter. "We need to talk." Lila glanced at the papers, then at his face. Her smile faded. "What is this? Bank records," he said. "Vendor registrations. Transfer logs." She went very still. "You went through my files." "I followed the money." For a long moment, only the sound of bubbling water filled the room. Then she laughed softly, like he had made a joke in poor taste. "You do not understand how non-profits work. Try me." Her eyes sharpened. "Administrative costs are not illegal. Setting up fake vendors to pay yourself is—" Silence stretched. Finally, she said, "I built that foundation from nothing. I worked 80-hour weeks while you did what exactly?" His chest tightened. "I believed you." Her voice rose. "You think donors would give if they knew how messy real impact is. You think hospitals run on pure intentions. Money has to move. People have to be taken care of. Taken care of like the condo in Scottsdale." She flinched. "You had no right." He slammed his hand on the counter. "Kids waited for equipment while you renovated a vacation kitchen." Tears sprang to her eyes. "I deserved something. After everything I sacrificed." He looked at her and saw not a monster but a woman who had crossed lines one step at a time until she no longer saw them. "I already talked to a lawyer," he said quietly. Her face went white. "You would destroy us." "No, Lila, you did that." The investigation went public 3 months later. Headlines used words like alleged and misappropriation. Donors felt betrayed. Board members resigned. News vans parked outside their house. Emma asked why reporters were yelling Lila's name. Daniel told her mommy had made some bad choices about money and grown-ups were trying to fix it. Lila moved into a small apartment across town. In court, she cried. She apologized. She said she had lost her way. Some of it was true. Daniel sat in the back row, hands clasped, feeling both grief and grim relief. The foundation was restructured under new leadership. Emergency audits redirected remaining funds. Months later, Daniel visited the hospital again. A nurse showed him a new piece of equipment installed with recovered money. A child slept in the bed beside it, small chest rising and falling. Daniel stood there a long time. He did not feel heroic. He felt tired, sad, older. But when he walked outside into the sharp winter air, he also felt something else. The applause in his head had finally stopped, and in the quiet, he could hear the truth. Winter settled in slowly, like a truth no one wanted, but everyone had to live with. Daniel learned the new shape of silence. Mornings used to be noise. Lila on calls while making smoothies. Emma arguing about socks. The hum of two adults moving in practiced choreography around each other. Now it was just the fridge motor and the soft scrape of a chair across tile. Emma sat at the table coloring before school. She had started drawing houses with 2 roofs, one for Mommy, one for Daddy. Daniel kept his voice steady when she asked simple questions with complicated weight. Is Mommy still helping the kids at the hospital? He chose each word like stepping stones across a river. Other people are helping right now. Mommy is working on fixing some mistakes. Emma nodded like that made sense. Kids were good at accepting emotional weather they did not deserve. At night, after she slept, Daniel sometimes scrolled old photos on his phone. Lila laughing with cake batter on her nose. Lila asleep on the couch with grant papers on her chest. Lila crying the night their first fundraiser barely broke even, swearing she would never give up on the kids who had no one else. He did not delete the pictures. He did not look at them for long either. The legal process moved in slow, grinding steps. Interviews, depositions, account reviews that felt like autopsies. Daniel answered questions in small beige offices that smelled like stale coffee. When did you first suspect? What evidence did you gather? Did you benefit financially? That last one always stung. No, he would say, I was just her husband. Just. Lila lawyer tried to paint things in softer colors. Poor oversight, emotional burnout, blurred lines between mission and compensation. Daniel almost believed it some days. Then he would remember the spreadsheet, the fake vendors, the deliberate layering. Blurred lines did not open shell accounts. One afternoon in early spring, he met Lila at a family counselor office to discuss co-parenting. She looked thinner, less polished. No stage lights to soften the edges. They sat on opposite ends of a couch that had seen 100 other couples fail in quieter ways. The counselor spoke gently about routines for Emma. Consistency, reassurance, no adult details. Lila nodded, eyes glossy. After the session, they stood awkwardly in the parking lot. For a moment, neither moved. I never meant for it to go that far, she said finally. Daniel studied her face. He wanted to find the exact moment she stepped over the line. The day intention turned into entitlement. I believe you, he said. She looked surprised. But you kept going anyway. Her shoulders sagged. I thought I could fix it later, after the next fundraiser, after the next grant. There was always a next thing that would make it right. He almost reached for her hand. Instead, he put his keys in his pocket. Emma needs us to be honest now, he said, even if it is ugly. Lila nodded and got into her car. That night, Daniel helped Emma build a model bridge out of popsicle sticks for a school project. Glue stuck to his fingers. One support beam kept collapsing. Emma frowned at the wobbling structure. It is not working. He adjusted the base. Bridges only hold if the support is real, he said without thinking. She looked at him seriously, then added more glue where it actually connected. Weeks later, a letter arrived from the restructured foundation. They thanked him for cooperating with the investigation. They shared plans for new oversight, transparent reporting, stricter controls. At the bottom was a photo, a treatment room painted in bright ocean colors, new equipment installed. A small plaque listing major recovered funds. He sat at the kitchen table staring at that image. This was the part Lila had always talked about, the visible difference, the saved time, the quieter suffering. It existed now, but carved through wreckage. He drove to the hospital that weekend, not for a ceremony, not for recognition, just to see. In the hallway, he watched a volunteer push a cart of toys past a row of rooms. Parents sat in chairs too small for adults, exhaustion etched deep. A doctor adjusted a monitor attached to the very machine from the photo. Life going on, help still needed. Work bigger than any one person. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. For months, his identity had been wrapped around exposure. Evidence, stopping harm. Standing there, he realized that was only half the story. Repair mattered too. On the drive home, traffic crawled under a pale evening sky. He did not turn on the radio. He thought about Emma growing up with this chapter in her family history. He thought about the version of Lila who had once meant every word on those stages. People were not single moments. They were long roads with wrong turns and sometimes chances to turn back. At a red light, he rested his forehead briefly against the steering wheel. He was still angry. He was still heartbroken. But he was no longer confused. When he pulled into the driveway, Emma ran out with a drawing in her hand. "Look, Daddy, 2 houses again." But this time, between them, she had drawn a bridge. It was crooked. Too many lines in one place. Not enough in another. Still standing, Daniel crouched and hugged her tight, the paper crinkling between them. Inside, the house felt different than it had a year ago. Quieter. Smaller. More honest. And for the first time since the applause started, that felt like something solid enough to build on. Summer came with the kind of heat that made everything feel slightly swollen and exposed. Daniel noticed it in himself, too. He had less patience for small talk at work, less energy for pretending he was fine. Grief did not look dramatic from the outside. It looked like forgetting why he walked into a room. One evening, he sat on the back steps while Emma chased fireflies across the yard. The grass needed mowing. A plastic cup lay tipped over near the fence where she had left it hours ago. Normal life, messy and ordinary. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "I wanted you to hear this from me before it shows up online." It was Lila. He stared at the screen, pulse quickening. There was a link to a local news article. A photo of her outside a community center, hair pulled back, no makeup, wearing a plain volunteer badge. He almost did not open it. The headline said she had begun working with a financial literacy program for low-income families as part of her court-mandated restitution plan. Not fundraising. Not leading, assisting. The article mentioned she spoke to small groups about accountability, about how easy it was to justify small ethical compromises until they were not small anymore. Daniel read the piece first line 3 times. She had always been good with words. Still, something in the photo felt different. No stage, no spotlight, folding chairs, and a whiteboard behind her. Emma ran over, breathless. "Daddy, look, I caught one." A firefly blinked in her cupped hands. Fragile green light pulsing in the dark. He smiled and helped her release it. That night, after she slept, he replied to Lila's message with one line. "I hope you mean it." 3 dots appeared almost immediately, then disappeared. Then came her answer. "I am trying to." He set the phone down and sat in the quiet kitchen. Trying was not the same as fixing, but it was not nothing. Weeks passed. The divorce paperwork moved forward with the dull finality of forms and signatures. They divided furniture, closed joint accounts, discussed holidays in neutral voices that avoided old landmines. One Saturday, they met at a park for Emma's soccer game. Folding chairs lined the field. Kids swarmed the ball in chaotic clusters. Parents cheered like it was the World Cup. Daniel stood on one sideline, Lila on the other. At halftime, Emma ran to them both, sweaty and grinning. "Did you see my kick?" "We saw it," they said at the same time. For a moment they laughed. Not the polished laugh from galas, a tired, real one that surprised all 3 of them. Later, while Emma dug in the snack bag, Lila stepped closer. "I talked to one of the moms from the literacy class," she said. She cried because she finally understood her credit card statements. "I used to move money around like it was abstract. Now, every dollar has a face." Daniel studied the field instead of her. "That is good." "I know I do not get to ask for anything," she said, "but thank you for stopping me when you did. If it had gone on longer, I do not know who I would be now." He felt the old ache rise, then settle. "I did not stop you to save you," he said quietly. "I did it because kids were waiting." She nodded. "I know." That was the closest they came to closure, not forgiveness, not friendship. Just shared truth, standing in the open air. In the fall, Daniel got an email from the Hospital Foundation. They were launching a new parent advisory board to help shape how recovered funds were used. They asked if he would consider joining as a community member. His first instinct was to close the message. He had spent a year inside spreadsheets and courtrooms. He was tired of causes. Then he thought about the treatment room painted ocean blue. about the small chest rising and falling beside that machine. He thought about Emma drawing bridges. He wrote back yes. The first meeting was in a plain conference room with bad coffee and a flickering projector. Parents spoke about parking costs, about needing better overnight chairs, about how small improvements made unbearable days slightly less brutal. No applause, no speeches, just people trying to make hard things a little less hard. Daniel drove home after dark, headlights cutting through drifting leaves. He did not feel heroic. He felt useful. At a stop sign near his house, he looked at the quiet neighborhood. Porch lights, curtains half drawn, lives unfolding behind walls in ways no one else fully saw. He had learned something he wished he had never needed to learn. Good intentions did not cancel harm. Love did not replace accountability, but damage did not have to be the final chapter either. Inside, Emma had left her latest drawing on the fridge. 2 houses, a bridge between them. And this time, under the bridge, she had drawn water, moving, not frozen. Daniel touched the paper lightly, then turned off the kitchen light. In the dark, the house did not feel like a stage or a courtroom. Just a place where imperfect people kept trying, one honest day at a time. The first time Daniel spoke at the advisory board, his voice shook, not from stage fright, from memory. They were discussing how to allocate a recovered grant. Some wanted new lobby renovations to impress donors. Others argued for expanding overnight family rooms. The debate stayed polite, professional. Daniel listened, fingers laced tight in his lap. Then he pictured a father he had seen months ago asleep in a plastic chair, shoes still on, back twisted at an angle no spine should hold. He cleared his throat. Comfort is not cosmetic, he said. When parents can rest, they make better decisions. They hear doctors more clearly. They do not break down in hallways. The room went quiet. He was not a fundraiser, not a medical expert, just someone who had stood in the middle of consequences. The vote shifted. Funds moved toward family support spaces. Driving home, Daniel realized his hands were steady on the wheel. Not because things hurt less, because he was finally placing the hurt somewhere useful. At school, Emma started a unit on community. Parents were invited to speak about their jobs. Daniel almost declined. He still disliked being looked at as the man from the news story. But Emma asked, with hopeful eyes, "Please come. You can talk about helping kids at the hospital." So he stood in a classroom of second graders sitting cross-legged on a carpet with cartoon letters. He did not mention fraud, or courtrooms, or betrayal. He talked about listening, about how grown-ups sometimes make mistakes, and other grown-ups have to help fix them. A boy raised his hand. "Were you scared?" Daniel smiled. "Yes, but doing the right thing while scared still counts." Emma beamed at him like he had just won a trophy. That night, he cried in the shower where no one could see. Not from sadness, from the strange relief of no longer hiding. Lila progress appeared in small, unannounced ways. She sent proof of each restitution payment without commentary. She forwarded flyers for the budgeting classes she helped organize, no dramatic speeches, no requests for praise. Once, she dropped Emma off and lingered by the car. "I had to explain late fees to a woman today," she said quietly. She kept apologizing for not understanding sooner. "I used to talk about numbers like they were strategy. Now they feel like weight." Daniel nodded. "Weight is real," he said. She gave a small, tired smile. "I know." They were no longer partners. No longer enemies either. Just 2 people orbiting the same child, trying not to pass their damage down. Months later, Daniel walked through the hospital again, this time for an advisory walkthrough. A new family lounge had opened. Softer lights. Fold-out sleep chairs. A small kitchenette stocked with donated snacks. On one wall hung a framed note from a parent. Thank you for giving us a place to breathe. Daniel stood there longer than necessary. He thought about applause in ballrooms, about numbers on screens, about how easy it was to chase impact that looked impressive instead of impact that felt human. His phone buzzed, a photo from Emma, a drawing taped to her bedroom wall. 2 houses, a bridge, and now tiny stick figures standing on it together. No labels, no explanations, just connection. Daniel slipped the phone back into his pocket and stepped into the hallway where real life hummed in low, steady tones. He still missed the woman he thought Lila was. He still grieved the years built on half-truths. But grief no longer owned the whole story. Accountability had carved out space for something quieter, honesty. And in that space, imperfect people were learning how to walk forward without pretending the past had never happened. No applause, just footsteps. Steady. Years did not erase what happened. They layered over it, like paint on a wall that still held old nail holes underneath. Emma grew taller, lost baby teeth, started asking sharper questions that did not fit into gentle half-answers. One evening, while they washed dishes together, she said it without looking up. "Did Mommy steal money?" The word hung in the steam above the sink. Daniel dried his hands slowly. "Yes," he said. "She did." Emma swallowed. "But she helps people now." "Yes. So which one is she?" He crouched to her height. "Both," he said. "People are not just the worst thing they did, but the worst thing still counts." Emma thought about that longer than most adults would. Then she nodded and handed him another plate. Life moved forward in small, stubborn steps. Daniel started seeing someone a year later. Not a dramatic romance. Just coffee that turned into long walks, conversations that did not feel like interviews. Her name was Marisol, a physical therapist at the same hospital. She knew his story before their 3rd date. He told it simply. No villain speeches. No self-praise. She listened without flinching. Trust rebuilt differently this time. Slower. With questions asked out loud instead of buried. One night, as they sat on his porch after Emma went to sleep, Marisol said something that settled deep. "You did not just expose harm. You stayed to help fix it. That tells me who you are." He had never framed it that way. For so long he had defined himself by what he had endured. What he had lost. Not what he had chosen afterward. At the hospital, the advisory board rotated members. New parents came in with fresh grief, fresh exhaustion. Daniel became one of the steady ones who explained how things worked. He showed them the lounge, the sleep chairs, the small changes born from hard lessons. Sometimes he told them without details that systems only stay honest when ordinary people pay attention. Most nodded, tired but listening. One winter afternoon he crossed paths with Lila in the hospital corridor by accident. She was there as part of a financial literacy outreach partnership, helping families understand medical billing. They stopped a few feet apart, no shock, no drama, just recognition of shared history standing quietly between them. "Emma told me you are on the board now," she said. "Yeah, that is good." "You too," she nodded. "I'm not trying to be who I was, just trying to be useful where I can." He believed her, not because she said it well, because she did not say it loudly. They did not hug, did not revisit the past. They walked in opposite directions, both carrying pieces of the same old story, shaped into something less sharp. That night, Daniel tucked Emma into bed. She was working on an art project about bridges again, construction paper, glue, string for cables. "You still like bridges," he said. She smiled sleepily. They connect things that almost fell apart. He kissed her forehead and turned off the light. Downstairs, the house was quiet in a way that no longer felt empty, just calm. Daniel stood by the window for a moment, watching the porch light glow against the dark. Once, applause had filled his ears so loudly he could not hear anything else. Now there was no applause, just the low hum of a heater, the distant sound of a car passing, the soft rhythm of a life rebuilt without pretending it had never broken. He did not feel like a hero. He felt like a man who had learned the cost of looking away, and chosen, every day since, not to. Spring returned with the kind of light that made even old neighborhoods look briefly new. Daniel noticed it on a Saturday morning while repainting the peeling trim along his front porch. The wood had been flaking for years. He had always meant to fix it. There had just always been something louder, demanding attention. Now, with a brush in his hand and a radio murmuring low from inside, the task felt honest, limited, finishable. Emma sat on the steps beside him, legs stretched out, tapping two rocks together like drumsticks. "Do grown-ups still make mistakes when they are old?" she asked. He smiled without looking up. "All the time, even you, especially me." She seemed satisfied with that. Across town, Lila was rebuilding too, though in a different shape. Her court supervision had ended months ago. The restitution payments would continue for years, but the structure around her had loosened. She had taken a salaried position with a nonprofit coalition that trained small charities on financial transparency. Not fundraising, not leadership. Systems and compliance. Unseen work. The kind she once would have called boring. One afternoon she stood in a fluorescent-lit community center classroom, showing a group of overwhelmed volunteers how to read a basic financial statement. Her voice was quieter than it used to be. Less polished, more careful. "Money tells a story," she said. "If you cannot explain where it goes in plain language, you should not move it." She did not mention her past unless directly asked, but it lived in every pause before she answered a question. Back at the hospital, Daniel sat in another advisory meeting as plans rolled out for a new family resource desk. A social worker described parents getting lost in paperwork while their children underwent treatment. Daniel remembered his own confusion in those early days after the scandal broke. Legal terms, financial documents, words that made your head spin when your heart was already tired. He raised his hand. "Can we include a volunteer who just sits with families and helps them go through forms? Not rushing, just staying with them." The room nodded. It was a small thing. Small things were what he trusted now. That evening, Marisol came over with takeout containers balanced in her arms. Emma insisted they eat on the living room floor picnic style. At some point, Emma fell asleep curled against the couch, mouth open, half a spring roll still in her hand. Marisol laughed softly and brushed hair from the girl's forehead. "You did good," she said to Daniel. At what? At not letting bitterness be the thing she learned from all this. He looked at his daughter, at the easy way she had begun to talk about hard topics without fear. "I almost let it," he admitted, "but you did not." Later, after Marisol left and the house went quiet, Daniel stepped outside. The night air carried the faint smell of cut grass and distant rain. He thought about the version of himself from years ago, standing in the back of a ballroom, clapping until his palms stung, believing goodness was whatever looked brightest under a spotlight. He did not hate that man anymore. He understood him. Wanting to believe is not the same as being foolish. It is being human. What mattered was what you did when belief cracked. Inside, Emma's voice drifted from her room, sleep talking nonsense about bridges and dogs and purple skies. Daniel smiled in the dark. Life had not returned to what it was. It had become something else. Less shiny, more solid. No grand redemption arcs, no dramatic reunions. Just people waking up each day with a clearer understanding of the weight of their choices, and choosing, again and again, to carry that weight in a direction that did a little less harm. The porch light flicked off behind him as a timer clicked. Daniel stood there a moment longer, listening to the quiet hum of a neighborhood full of unseen stories. Then he went inside, locked the door, and turned toward the steady, ordinary future waiting in the next room. The email arrived on a gray Monday that did not feel important. Subject line, invitation to speak. Daniel almost deleted it. He had turned down most requests over the years. Panels about ethics, interviews about whistleblowing, podcasts that wanted a clean hero story with sharp villains. Life had taught him there were no clean versions. Still, this one was different. A regional conference for small nonprofit leaders. Topic: building trust after failure. He stared at the screen a long time. Then he wrote back yes. The conference room smelled like coffee and new carpet. Folding tables, name tags, nervous energy. Daniel stood at the front with a plastic water bottle sweating in his hand. He did not bring slides. He told them about applause that drowned out questions, about how easy it was to believe impact stories without reading the footnotes. He told them he had loved someone who started with good intentions and still caused real harm. He told them oversight was not a lack of trust. It was a form of care. The room stayed quiet in the way that meant people were listening, not just waiting to talk. Afterward, a young director approached him. "We are small," she said. "I thought controls were for big organizations. Now I see they are for protecting our own hearts, too." Daniel nodded. That was the part no spreadsheet showed. Protection from the slow drift of justification. On the drive home, rain streaked the windshield in thin, steady lines. He did not feel drained like he used to after speaking about the past. He felt aligned, like the story had finally settled into its right place inside him. Not a wound, a scar that still taught. That night, Emma had a school concert. Off-key singing. Parents recording through cracked phone screens. Lila stood 3 rows ahead with a small bouquet of grocery store flowers. When Emma spotted them both in the crowd, she waved with both arms, beaming. After the show, they met in the lobby under buzzing lights. Emma chattered between them, words tumbling over each other. "Did you hear my solo part? I was the loudest, right?" "You were amazing," they both said. For a moment, the 3 of them stood close, orbiting the same small, bright center. Then Emma ran off to show a friend her flowers. Lila looked at Daniel. "I heard you are speaking at conferences now." "A few, that is good. People should hear it from someone who lived it." He shrugged lightly. "I just tell the truth." She smiled, tired but sincere. "That's harder than it sounds." They parted without heaviness, not healed, not broken either, just 2 lives that had collided, fractured and reshaped around the impact. Years earlier, Daniel had thought justice would feel like a dramatic finish line. Instead, it had felt like paperwork, court dates, quiet hospital hallways. Now, he understood something else. Justice was not a single moment. It was the daily choice to stay honest when no one was clapping. Late that night, after Emma was asleep and the house had settled into its soft breathing sounds, Daniel stood at her bedroom door. On the wall hung her newest drawing. 2 houses, a bridge. Underneath, she had written in careful, uneven letters, "Still connected." Daniel leaned his head against the doorframe and closed his eyes. The past had not disappeared. It had been woven into the present, thread by thread, until it no longer cut to the touch. He turned off the hallway light and walked back toward his room. No applause, no headlines. Just a man, a child, and a future built on the kind of truth that did not need a stage to matter. Years later, the story no longer felt like a headline. It felt like a foundation. Not the kind built with galas and banners. The kind built quietly, under everything else. Emma was old enough now to ride her bike to school with friends. Her backpack looked too big for her shoulders, but she insisted she was fine. Daniel stood at the curb that first morning, watching until she turned the corner. Letting go did not get easier. It just became familiar. At the hospital, the family resource desk had grown into a full support center. Volunteers rotated in shifts. A retired teacher helped parents fill out forms. A college student translated for families who needed it. On the wall hung a simple sign: "You do not have to understand everything today." Daniel passed it every time he came in for meetings. He had needed those words once, though not for medical reasons. One afternoon, a new board member asked how he stayed involved for so long after everything. Daniel thought for a moment. "Because leaving would have been easier," he said. "And easy is what let things slide before." The man nodded slowly. Staying was its own kind of accountability. Lila life settled into something steady and unremarkable in the best way. Work, classes, a small apartment filled with second-hand furniture and carefully labeled folders. She and Daniel spoke mostly about Emma. Schedules, school events, dentist appointments. Sometimes, though, a different kind of message came through. A photo of a packed budgeting workshop. A note about a family who avoided eviction after learning how to negotiate a payment plan. No grand claims, just updates. Daniel always replied the same way. "I'm glad it helped. It was not forgiveness. It was acknowledgement." One evening, near the end of summer, Emma sat at the kitchen table working on a school essay. Topic: a bridge in your life. Daniel tried not to read over her shoulder, but she waved him closer. "Listen," she said, and began to read. "A bridge is something that lets you go from one place to another without falling. My family had a hard time, but we built a bridge with honesty and help from other people. Bridges are not magic. You have to keep fixing them so they stay strong." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "That is really good," he said quietly. She grinned. "I know." Later, after she went to bed, Daniel stepped onto the porch. The neighborhood hummed with crickets and distant televisions. A dog barked once, then stopped. He thought about the man he had been. The woman Lila had been. The child caught in the middle. He thought about the choices made after the damage surfaced. The long, unglamorous work of repair. No one would make a movie about this part. No dramatic music. Just ordinary days stacked carefully on top of each other. Each one a small decision not to look away. Daniel leaned against the porch railing and breathed in the warm night air. The future did not look perfect. It looked real. And after everything, real was more than enough. Autumn arrived the way it always did, without asking whether anyone was ready. Leaves gathered in the corners of Daniel's yard. The air carried that dry, fragile scent of things letting go. Inside, Emma worked on a science project about structures that could hold weight. She had chosen bridges again, this time building one from the thin wooden dowels and glue that stuck to her fingers. Daniel sat across from her at the table, paying bills, answering emails from the advisory board, moving through the quiet mechanics of a life that no longer felt like it might collapse at any moment. "Do you think this will hold?" Emma asked, pressing gently on the middle of her model. It bent, but did not break. "Depends where you put the support," he said. She added another brace underneath, tongue peeking out in concentration. Later that week, he received another message from the conference organizer. They wanted to record his talk for online training materials. He paused before answering. For years, he had avoided visibility, afraid that telling the story would turn it into performance. But he had learned the difference between attention and usefulness. If sharing what happened could help another small organization catch a problem early, before harm spread, then silence would be its own kind of negligence. He agreed. The recording took place in a small studio with soft lights and a single chair. No applause, no dramatic music. Just Daniel and a quiet camera. He spoke about warning signs, about how trust and oversight were not opposites, about how loving someone did not mean protecting them from consequences. Most of all, he spoke about what came after exposure. The slow rebuilding, the choice to stay engaged instead of walking away bitter. When it was over, he stepped outside into bright midday sun and felt strangely light. Not because the past was gone, because it no longer owned the whole narrative. That evening, Emma had a sleepover at Lila's apartment. Daniel dropped her off, carrying a bag of pajamas and a stuffed rabbit that was more thread than fabric now. Lila met them at the door, hair pulled back, wearing an old sweatshirt. "Thanks for bringing her early," she said. "We are making homemade pizza." Emma tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, look. Mommy has a new bookshelf." Inside, the apartment looked lived in, modest, orderly. Papers stacked neatly, a calendar with reminders written in careful handwriting. Lila caught his glance. "I am learning to like simple," she said. He nodded. "Simple can be honest." Emma hugged him quickly and ran inside. For a moment, Daniel and Lila stood in the hallway. "We did not do everything right," she said quietly. "But we did not let it end in the worst way either." "No," he agreed. "We did not." He drove home through streets lined with trees half-turned gold. At a red light, he realized something that would have once surprised him. He was no longer angry every day. Some days, yes, when memories surfaced, sharp and uninvited. But most days, the dominant feeling was steadier. Acceptance, not approval, not forgetting. Just the understanding that this was the path their lives had taken, and the only direction left was forward. Years folded into each other. Emma grew into a teenager with opinions, messy handwriting, and a fierce sense of fairness that sometimes startled her teachers. When classmates cut corners on group projects, she called it out. When a friend was being excluded, she noticed. Daniel saw the roots of that in everything she had lived through. One evening, as she worked on college applications at the kitchen table, she asked a question that made him set down his mug. "Do you regret telling the truth about Mom?" He thought carefully before answering. "I regret that it had to be told at all," he said. "But no, not telling would have hurt more people for longer." She nodded slowly. "I think so too." In that moment, he felt the last lingering doubt loosen its grip. The story that had once felt like a public scandal now lived quietly as a family history lesson. A reminder of how easily good intentions could drift, and how necessary it was to pull them back with honesty before the damage spread too far. On the final day of Emma's senior year, she asked him to help clean out old school folders. At the bottom of one box, they found a crumpled drawing from years ago. 2 houses, a bridge, faded marker lines, corners bent. Emma smiled. "I drew this when everything felt broken," she said. "I did not know if it would really work." Daniel looked at the paper, then at his daughter, taller now, steadier. "It did not fix everything," he said, "but it gave us a way across." That night, after she went to a graduation party, Daniel stood alone on the back porch. The air was warm. Fireflies blinked over the lawn like quiet signals in the dark. He thought about applause in ballrooms, about spreadsheets glowing on a screen at 2 in the morning, about courtrooms, hospital hallways, school concerts, kitchen tables, about the long chain of ordinary days that followed the moment everything cracked. There had been no dramatic redemption scene, no perfect restoration, just people making better choices than they had before, again and again. He understood now that integrity was not a trait you either had or did not. It was a practice, a daily decision, often invisible, to line up your actions with the truth even when it cost you comfort, reputation, or love. Daniel leaned on the railing and listened to the night. No applause, no headlines. Just the steady, quiet sound of a life rebuilt on ground that had been tested and found strong enough to hold. And that, in the end, was more than enough. If this story made you feel something, take a second and listen to that. Real life does not fall apart in one loud moment. It drifts, little by little, when people stop asking hard questions. And sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is tell the truth when it would be easier to stay quiet. Have you ever faced a moment where doing the right thing meant losing something you loved? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might help someone else find the courage they need. And if you believe stories like this matter, the quiet ones about choices and consequences, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next one. We tell these stories because real-life lessons deserve to be heard.